Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 7 Dot Studio Christmas YouTube Hop. I'm super excited to be here with you. 2 videos in 1 week. I feel like a total rock star. This is a huge majority of the 7 Dot Studio design team and ambassadors and just people who love 7 Dot Studio. We're creating all these beautiful projects, winter themed and Christmas themed, and there's prizes to be given away. So make sure you're following the rules and subscribing to all the channels and letting people know that you love their projects and you're thankful that we put these tutorials together for you. Here's the project that I'll be working on and some close-up shots, and I really love this piece. It's bright and fun and very wintry, and I'm using my Northern Lights 6x6 paper pad collection for 7 Dot Studio. So I have a really wonderful, unique relationship with 7 Dot Studio, and I get to design all of our paper collections. And we have other people who design them too. We've had Anna, and we've had Finnabear, and Tusi has done one, and so we do have other designers, but lately I've been designing 2 collections each release, and it really makes me super happy. I love 7 Dot Studio, and we work really well together. So I am using my Northern Lights collection, which is this very sort of twinkly, kind of like Christmassy, not Christmassy, wintry atmosphere to it, and it had some trees and lots of snowflakes and really fun, beautiful colors. I'm also using a piece of Unwow Studio chipboard, and then this is a 6" by 6" piece of board, so just a blank board canvas. It doesn't have canvas on it, it's just a straight up board. And I'm going to mount some of my 7 Dot Studio Northern Lights paper directly to the board. And it's like I spend a lot of time working on these papers, and they have lots of really beautiful, lovely layers to them. So they lend themselves really well to mixed media projects. So I really wanted to have a paper base today, and I'm using Golden's Heavy Gel Medium in matte to anchor my papers to my board. And so I just use a scraper tool, a Princeton Catalyst tool, to spread the matte medium, the gel medium, all over the board, and then I put my paper down and I use a scraper tool. It's like much heavier plastic than the silicone tool, and to make sure that there's 100% contact between the paper and the board. And then I let that dry with something heavy over it, and then I did the sides as well with a second piece of paper, and I just trimmed the paper down to fit the sides. And then this way my canvas now has stuff not only on the surface, but I've finished the sides of the canvas as well, the board. And that's important. So you can kind of do one of 2 things when you're working on a project that has depth to it. You can either completely finish the edges, or you can leave them as pristinely clean as possible. And that's just sort of like a final detail to your piece. You don't really want to normally leave them just as they are. So like if your paint drips to the side or something like that. So keep that in mind while you're working. Work on your sides as well as the top. And then I got out some Prima Marketing Finnabear art stones. I have the mini art stones in the regular size. I haven't purchased the jumbo ones yet, but I want to, but a lot of the work that I do is smaller and more fine detail. So I'm not sure how much use I'll put them to, but they are on my Christmas wish list, so maybe Santa will put them in my stocking. I'm working on this rocking horse from Unwow Studio, and our chipboard is like a really heavy, dense chipboard. So the first thing I can like throw a lot of stuff at it, and it's really nice. The first thing that I'm doing is covering it in a heavy gesso. And this is just so that I have a base layer of white. I know that I want to build upon it with some paint after I'm done with this next step. And that'll be easier to do if it's white first, because white will accept any color, where that like sort of craft natural brown is really kind of intense. And then I have the gel medium out again, and I'm putting kind of a thick layer on my horse, on my rocking horse. I want to embed those beads now, the art stones, into this piece to give it texture. And so I do that by putting the gel medium, and then I lay him in a little saucer and sprinkle some of the large ones on him. And then I'm going to use my fingers to really push them down into the gel medium. And I kind of struggle with one that got stuck in his tail here. That got kind of irritating, I'm not going to lie. And then I'm going to sprinkle, then I put the excess back in the jar, and then I sprinkle the tiny ones. And I'm getting, this is kind of cool, I'm getting to the end of my bottle, and so I need to replenish, but towards the end, you get like really, really tiny little pieces, and it's almost like a really fine sand. It's kind of cool. So I have quite a different texture towards the bottom of these art stones than I did when I first started. And that's like a really nice feature, something totally unintended, I'm sure, but it's pretty great. And then I just use a funnel to push back in the excess of those beads, the art stones. I keep saying beads, but it's more like a coarse foam kind of. Like they're really cool. They have a completely different texture. And then I'm going to heat the gel medium dry. It is important to remember that it's a fairly thick layer of gel medium. And so if I apply too much heat to that, it is going to bubble. One of the things that I did that I didn't show in the video because I just forgot to turn the video back on, but I sprayed a couple layers of matte sealer over the horse just to really make sure that everything was permanent and held down. And then because I'm working on an art piece and I don't really want like texture and pieces falling off. Like I don't want those beads coming off my horse. So I did a couple thick layers of a matte sealer, and then I heated that dry, and it gave kind of a cool texture in the areas where there isn't a lot of the a lot of the art stones. And then I am using, so in this little container is some water and some airbrush medium, and then there is white and black fluid acrylic by Golden. And so I just created this sort of grungy, dirty gray color, and it's really playing well in those beads and in those art stones and catching all the detail that I've created on this piece. And then also that gesso, it's a heavy gesso, so it's kind of gritty and it's not as smooth as some other gessos, and it helps add to the texture as well. So it's all about like layering things up, and I really like to experiment and have fun with this type of stuff. So yeah, it's a really cool sort of little alteration that I get on my rocking horse. And then I did I did that 2 or 3 times with the paint. And then I was going to dry rub some gesso on top of the surface, but I could tell again that the art stones, I didn't quite get them set as heavy in there as I would have liked. So again, I did a couple layers of that matte sealer, and it's just some spray sealer by Grumbacher there, and then you can see how cool all that texture is that came out on the horse. It's pretty incredible. Then I got out, so this is that heavy gesso because it has that really cool gritty texture. And then I am using an Wow Studio stencil, Moroccan tile stencil, and I'm adding this pattern to the top left corner and to the right hand sort of middle area of my 6x6 piece. So I do try to keep in mind that I'm working on a fairly small piece, and I don't want too much of the paper to be covered. But I know that the next thing I'll do is dry this and then add some black paint. So I tried to keep the stenciling to a minimum. So it's not overbearing all over the whole page, but you can definitely see that texture and that shape pattern peeking through. And then as I'm sitting here, I'm so glad that my brain was working, because one of the things that I did earlier that I think I forgot to mention was I used a distress pad to darken all the edges and where the two papers met from the top and the side. I didn't want that like white crease showing there. So I used some black paint. I used a black ink pad, and it's actually archival ink that I have squirted into a DIY pad. and I darkened all the corners and the edges with that, and it looks really lovely. But then I knew that the next step where I wanted to add paint, and I hadn't sealed my paper with anything yet. And so if you add paint to straight up paper, 7 Dot Studio cardstock, it sucks it up. It just takes all the moisture, and then your paint is stuck where it's at. But I like to work with acrylic paint in a much more like fluid fashion. So my next step was then to cover all of my paper with fluid matte medium. And so it's a very fluid, like kind of like a thick milk, and it's matte and it's clear when it dries. So I just painted the entire project with that after my gessoed stencil had dried, and then I heated that dry. And it creates an envelope. It separates the paper from any of the wet mediums that are going to play on top of it, which you can see now after it's dry. Then I get to come back in with some, it's that little container of water that I was using before with the gray in it. And then I just now added some black fluid acrylic to make it a bit darker and more intense. And then I'm using that and a paintbrush, a bunch of water, and some baby wipes to accent the pattern from the Unwild Studio stencil. And it's really easy, and it's just fun, and adds in another layer of dimension. Gets some more depth going in our project. And then I was just trying to be careful about kind of what got spilt over on the edges, try to keep them clean and, you know, not have too much seepage. Because again, I'm sort of aiming for a finished piece with nice edges as well as a beautiful surface. And I'm loving how the horse is playing in everything that's happening, and I love the color scheme that's going on, and a lot of that comes from these beautiful 7 Dot Studio papers. Sometimes that's kind of, I feel a little bit guilty saying beautiful 7 Dot Studio papers because I get to design them, but it makes me so happy. I love working with Tusia and 7 Dot Studio, and it just really makes me happy as an artist getting to play with sort of colors and shapes and patterns and imagery and bringing this beautiful project to you, these beautiful collections. I did a little bit of splattering with that same paint, and just, you know, again, building up the background and working through all the layers. I really, if you watched my other video or if you watched any of them in the past, whatever they might be, art journaling or our mixed media moods or anything like that, you'll see that I really love masking tape, and I love the weirdness of it. I love that it has sort of this plasticky finish and it acts as a resist, but it's an office supply and it's already got sort of like a vintage tone to it, and the whole thing just lends itself really well to this project as well. And I use masking tape in a lot of stuff as a design element, as an anchor. So I layered up some here, and I tore some of the edges so that it wasn't all straight across. And then I used a Stabilo Marxol and some water to really grungy up that tape and to sort of help it blend into the background and not stick out like a sore thumb. And then I mentioned earlier that that tape acts as a resist. So when I put that Stabilo Marxol on top, it pools. It doesn't soak in. It's really neat. And I just love the effect that it gets. And then here again, just like on the horse, I thought I would highlight some texture with the gesso, but every time I go to do that, I feel like it's not giving me the exact feel that I want, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't always have to work out. So I just correct the issue and I move forward with my piece. And so I usually do have a lot of white space, and in this piece, my white space is the beautiful 7 Dot Studio paper. So it's kind of cool. I'm working on all these grungy elements that are piling on top, and the gesso, not the gesso, the gesso is unneeded because the paper is like such a star and there's already so much contrast in this piece. I decide now is the time to glue my horse down, my rocking horse, and so it's sort of feeling very like Northern Lights, twinkly, winter, snow, without being like snowflakes and in-your-face Christmas presents and things like that. So it's kind of cool. It's a really neat piece, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. So after I put my rocking horse down with gel medium, then I'm using a Sharpie paint pen. This is a water-based poster paint pen to highlight the horse. So I'm just going around all the edges, anywhere that my paint pen will fit, and I'm putting a solid line. And so at first I'm looking at it and I go like, I know that I need that, and it looks really, it does what it needs to, but it looks kind of clunky after I do that. And so as soon as that's done, then I decide to go around the edge with the paint pen again, but this time I'm going to do a line of dots. And then that really just sort of brings home this whole twinkly lights kind of feel that is happening and resonating from this piece. It's really neat, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. And when I sat down to do this project, I had sort of an idea, but I hadn't really decided on that much yet. And I don't work in purples or reds and pinks as often as I probably should, or let's see, in the past I haven't. So I have been recently trying to do more of those pieces. And then I splattered a little bit of that paint pen, and the only part that you won't see in this video is me finishing the edge. So what I did was I wrapped some wire around the edge, and I threaded some freshwater pearls, and then there's a tiny bit of fringe hanging down from the left-hand side that was made with some wool and some gray DMC floss. So again, thanks so much for joining me. Some of the close-up shots here, and please feel free to subscribe to my channel. I come out with videos pretty regularly. Towards the end of this year, it's gotten a little spread out. I did a 22-day tour in Australia, and then I missed a couple things while I was gone, but hop over to the next YouTube channel and visit 7 Dot Studio. Leave your comments, be entered to win prizes, and thanks so much for being here. Bye.